Hello everyone, Mugiwawa there, and starting my indie game dev journey. While I'm doing this indie game dev journey, I also want to have a little bit of short videos when I share a piece of my mind about something that I had time to reflect on while I'm doing my game. And today we are going to talk about a game design aspect, about the fixed number of turns that I decided to choose for my PvP combat system. And I was willing to share a bit this solution because that's a solution that I don't see very often in video games, in turn-based video games, and I think there is a lot of benefit from those. So most of the time in typical turn-based system, the way you win against your opponent or the AI is by killing everything that is on the other side of the board. That's a very simple and good way of doing things. Basically, most of the time in those games, you're just trying to overpower your opponent. So it got the job done. However, I still think there is multiple value with the fixed number of turn system. When you get to the fixed number of turn system, of course you need to have an alternative win condition. That is basically at the end of the fixed number of turn, one of the two teams is going to win based on something. For the sake of the discussion, we'll go for the very simplistic way of doing you gain victory points when you kill enemy units, and then the team that has the most victory point at the end of the last turn is winning. This is pretty simple, and that will be the solution we will use for the rest of the discussion. I just want to add a little something, is this victory point system is very flexible, and then you can basically extend it as you want. You have to be careful to not make it too much complex, but it's very interesting because then you can just add maybe secondary objectives. So it's just not all about killing stuff, but also taking position on the board and this type of things. So I think this system can really scale well, and that's very interesting. Now let's get on the benefit of going for a simple system like we said, fixed number of turn. Every time you kill an unit, you gain a victory points, and the team with the most victory point win the game. First thing that comes to mind is stuff that are outside of the game, is first the time commitment of your players. If you have a fixed number of turns and each turn have a maximum amount of play time, like most turn-based games do, then, well, you know the maximum amount of time a game will take. And you can use that and really be transparent with that with your players. And then every time a player wants to play your game, you just know that, okay, if I want to take a game, I need 20 minutes. And if I have 20 minutes, I'm fine. And there is not this range of between 10 to 30 minutes or even 15 to 1 hour that some game has. And so that's very great for the player, especially how the way we consume game nowadays. On top of that, for organized play, that's a blessing. Because in organized play, you have to manage the transmission and all of that, and also the players, and you don't want your player to wait too long and have the schedule that go over time. And so a fixed amount of time for your game is very good. That also alleviate the downtime of your players, all of that. So that's very beneficial on those part. Also, on the side, it can also ease a little bit the balance of your game, because now you have one less variable to take care of. Is the number of turn is fixed, so you knew this variable, she won't change, and so that makes it easier, and also alleviate a little bit the first player advantage, because now each player will get to play the same exact number of turn. Still, there is a first player advantage, most likely because one is playing before the other, but you don't have this additional turn in the classical game when the first player actually, if he wins during his turn, he actually play a full turn more than the opponent, and that's sometimes really hard to compensate for. So all those aspects, most aspects outside of the game, are very interesting. I also want to go into the game itself. I think one of the benefits is it provides very interesting strategical depths to your game, and also making it a little bit more easier to strategize. What I mean by that is, for instance, if you're like 2 turns away from the end of the game, then it's really easy to assess the number of victory points you have, the number of victory points your opponent has, and you have to make a plan that if I'm 2 victory points behind, how do I get 3 victory points without losing anything? It's pretty simple to do, much more simpler. I think it's simpler than just like how do I kill everything without getting killed before. And so you can actually like make your plan, strategize about that, and that's also like bring interesting stuff, because for instance, if you have like one unit that is like 10 points but your opponent only has 1 more turn to play, then suddenly like the whole plan becomes how do I make this unit survive just this next turn, that probably like give me the win. If the goal is just like kill everything, well, this unit has 10 life. It could be interesting, but I won't sacrifice my whole board position for that. So yeah, she's gonna die, that's okay. At the end of the day, she will have died no matter what, so why bother? And this is what I think, like in terms of like strategical thinking, I think that can be very beneficial for your game. But there is also another part that I think it's very beneficial for your game. And before I explain it, I want to just share one of my philosophy as a game designer is I think it's really your duty as a game designer that if you put mechanics in your game, that to be fair with the player, all those mechanics are strong, balanced, and usable. And also that I think it's your duty as a game designer that if you want to have like a tactical game with a deck building aspect, that you should let your player play whatever they want without putting external pressure on them. So I will need to detail a little bit what I mean by this external pressure. And to really explain this part, I will show like the most important example that comes to my mind, and which basically is most of the time in those games, those tactical turn-based games with deck building, you have like stuff that deal damage and stuff that sustain. It's not the only 2 things that there is in the game, of course, but we're simplifying for the sake of the discussion. And most of the time in the classical game, if you go like with aggro decks, you're trying to build like as much like damage as you can. And when you go into control deck, you're trying to go towards the sustain part. And if we have like 2 aggro strategies that are facing each other, the game is going to be short. If you have 2 control strategies that are facing each other, the game is going to be long. Once again, super oversimplified for the sake of the discussion. And the thing is, well, in many games you also have like a ladder system or something like that, and the ladder is based on your number of wins, and that's basically it. And so here you basically have a game system that tells you, yeah, you can play aggro, you can play control, but if you want to advance fast in the ladder, most likely better to play aggro deck, so that way you are going faster. And so that's what I mean by external pressure, is not the decision of the player is not about do I like to play aggro or do I like to play control, is do I like to play aggro and do I like to play control, but also in the balance you have like, yeah, but I also want to gain the reward so I can build other decks and also advance in the ladder, and so yeah, I'm going to play aggro. And the thing is, most of the time, game designer and developer are okay with it, because Like playing games that drags for a very, very, very long time and that are killing you at a slow pace is not fun to play. And so it's okay to skew your population towards playing like aggro deck and not towards control, so you limit those moments of big frustration, but at the same time you give the impression that you're still very open because like control strategy are still in the game. So that's a balance that works quite alright, but I don't think it's like fully fair, fully transparent, and fully respecting the player. Then there is like another solution that is simply to make that the sustain is not the strongest strategy, and so the game will always advance because the damage dealing part will always be superior to the sustain part of the game. And by doing so, I think that's also like not very fair for the player, because then you basically like put like, oh, damage dealing aspect, sustain aspect, but you said to a player, if you want to do a full sustain strategy, yeah, that's not gonna work. The full damage dealing strategy will beat that all the time. And so like, if there is a part of your game that is there to provide diversity, but you don't let the player really like fully explore it, I don't think that's a great way of doing it. So for all of that, I really think like with the fixed number of turn, you really fix all those issues. Because now it's okay to have a team that doesn't die, and it's also okay to have a team that just go like full face. Because in both situations, the time will be the same. So there is no impact on like the win per hours or this type of ratio that the player are always making if they want to optimize their experience. But it still makes the game interesting, because for the victory condition, it's always how do I get more victory points than my opponent? And when you have like two full phase strategy, most likely like the two teams is going to have a high number of victory points, but it's also like always like this difference between the two teams that is important. And between like two very sustaining composition, it's more like about not really like how do I kill a lot of stats, anymore how do I kill one stuff. But it's still very interesting because like you still know what is like the win condition, and it's very clear, and you can get there with the same amount of time, with the same amount of fun, and I think that's very, very interesting. So that's it for this video. I hope you kind of like the format when I openly share my thought on some aspect of my indie game dev journey. Of course, if you agree or disagree with any part of this video, feel free to leave a comment into the comment section, and so we will be able to exchange on that. And so I just want to thank you for watching this video. Have all a great day or a great evening depending on the time of the day, and see you soon.